Hi, good morning. This is Coleman Murphy with Smartcat. Welcome to our webinar, OpenAI, GPT, and AI Translation with Smartcat. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us today. And we've got a pretty good session lined up. It is going to be a product-focused kind of technical or deep dive on our implementation of OpenAI within Smartcat. So we encourage you to think about any technical questions that you might have in advance, and we will open it up for Q&A towards the end of the webinar. We will use the Q&A function within the Zoom webinar. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, you can probably see a Q&A button right there. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, you can submit those questions using the Q&A button, and then we will address them in order when we come towards the end. I'm just going to take a few minutes to allow some more people to join, and we will plan to get started no later than 8:05 a.m. Pacific time to make the most of your day. So again, thank you for joining us. And again, for those of you who have just joined, this is Coleman Murphy with the Smartcat team. Also on the webinar today, we have Igor, who is head of our product development team, and Juan, who manages technical implementations for Smartcat. Our topic today, OpenAI, GPT, and AI translation with Smartcat, is really intended to be a how-to or an informational view into Smartcat and the way we've implemented OpenAI GPT for translation, comparing that to some other platforms. We will be taking questions. We really want this to be as interactive as possible, but we also want to make sure we get through some of the background and demo first. So if you have questions, please feel free to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit those questions. Try to avoid using chat, and we will address those questions in order at the end of the webinar. I see people are continuing to join us, so we'll just go on mute for a moment or so. I also see some people have questions. Darren Hull, if anybody's having technical problems, then absolutely drop a note in the Q&A and let us know, or in chat and let us know. But hopefully this should be a straightforward, educational, engaging, and informative session for you. So I'm just going to give it about another 30 seconds, and then we'll get on with introductions agenda, and I'll get the show on the road. All right, it is showtime. I am going to, again, have the pleasure of introducing you to the Smartcat team, and we can talk about what our agenda is for today. So if we want to move on to the next slide. And I also, so our speakers today are Igor, who is our product director at Smartcat. He is one of the technical brains behind our implementation of GPT in the Smartcat platform, as well as pretty much anything related to the front end and implementations on the platform. So if you have questions, you have the right person on the other side to be able to answer those. Igor's going to open up and give you an overview of the different models of translation engines. And then we're going to move on to Juan, who is our solutions architect. Juan is directly responsible with helping our global customers implement Smartcat and integrate with different platforms. So again, you have the most technical people on the Smartcat team on the call right now. And then finally, you have me. I represent marketing, so don't ask me technical questions, but if you do have any needs, if you want to set up an individual call with the marketing team or the sales team, I'm happy to facilitate that as well. Again, we'll be taking questions throughout the session with the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. and we will answer those in order. And just to give you a little bit of background on our decision to do this specific session, which is very technical, this came out of a few different things that we've had going on over the last month or so. Several weeks ago, we ran a webinar which was specifically focused on website translation, WordPress websites specifically, using AI and GPT, our implementation of GPT. We'll drop a link to that webinar recording into chat. So if you're interested in that, you can take a look. But within that webinar, we got a huge number of questions on how specifically we had implemented GPT and what our observations were, what the limitations or opportunities were. So that was one data point. We were also at ATD last week, the Association for Talent Development, and so many people came up to us asking more technical questions about how does this work? How can I implement this? How can I use the different functions, not just for translation, but also for prompt development? So putting those together, we decided to have this much more technical session, which is really designed for people who want to get their hands in on the platform and test it out. So whether you already have whether you're working with an agency, if you're a freelancer, or if you're a representative for one of our Fortune 500 companies, this is your opportunity to learn more about the platform. If you do want to set up your own pilot or test environment, we can also help you with that, and I'll give a little bit more information on that towards the end of the webinar. But for right now, again, I want to welcome you, and I'm going to hand it over to Igor to take you forward with the next section.
Right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Coleman, for the intro. I will start with the agenda. So how will we structure our webinar? So first, I will give a little bit of a background in terms of how do we compare traditional machine translation and generative AI, such as OpenAI GPT. I'll give a brief slide of what Smartcat features you can already use today. And with that, I will hand it over to Juan, who will be doing the demo of those features. After that, we'll be talking just briefly of what's coming up next in Smartcat in terms of AI. And we'll have, I think, plenty of time for a Q&A session at the end. So traditional machine translation and generative AI. And as I was creating the slide, it kind of struck me that it's crazy that we're calling really cutting edge technology traditional MT now that we have generative AI also, but I wanted to contrast those two. So by traditional MT, I mean such commercial machine translation engines as Amazon, DeepL, Google, Microsoft, ModernMT, Yandex, all of which are available on our platform. And these are the best MT engines to use and to choose from. And Smartcat also allows to automatically select one of those engines when you use automatic translation inside Smartcat. So machine translation is great. And this kind of traditional machine translation approach, one of the pros of that is that it's predictable. What it means is that every time you run and translate something in a certain language, a certain phrase, you can pretty much guarantee that you'll have the same answer. Of course, machine translation engines, they evolve, and every month or so, they will be improving and tweaking things here and there, and the output might change for the better. But usually you can expect that the output is predictable, and predictable in quality. The quality can be really good. It can be, for certain language pairs, not so good, but you can, again, expect certain level of quality regardless of the content that you're processing with that. And that being said, traditional MT is really good for fully automatic translation without human supervision, at least for the pairs that are, the most popular, have more content, and then traditional MT engines provide already a very good baseline level of translation. So you have full range of options from fully unsupervised automatic translation to selective post-editing to full post-editing for some critical tasks. And this is great. This allows you to speed up the delivery time. But the problems with traditional MT is that it's kind of rigid. So it's hard to change its behavior. If you want to do that extra step towards the quality, change the output of those MT engines, you can hardly do that. Of course, you can provide your own glossaries. It comes with its own like pros and cons. But ultimately, you are getting the engine that was provided by DeepL, by Google, by Amazon, etc., and you're just using that. Also, machine translation, by its definition, is suitable just for translation only. So we'll talk about OpenAI GPT next, and we will talk how this is not exactly true for generative AI, but for traditional MT, you were just talking about pure translation. And the other pro of traditional MT is that it's fast. So you can expect like a typical document to be translated within seconds. So if you really want to quickly translate the document and start working on this, traditional MT is great for that. So let's talk about generative AI, how it compares to MT. First, it is unpredictable. Unpredictable, what I mean here is that with certain prompts, you can get a new result every time you run it. This is good and bad. The good side of that is that it's more, you can say it's more creative, more flexible, and it's suitable not only for translation. You can think of it as an like all-purpose text creation and transformation engine. And this is what we're using inside Smartcat, not only for doing translation as it is, but also doing all sorts of interesting things through AI actions. Since it's unpredictable, though you can run this automatically against your entire document, we still consider this as something that requires a supervised translation. So there should be a human who is reviewing whatever GPT is generating, because it can be great and creative at the majority of cases, but in certain cases it can provide like factually incorrect translation if we're talking about translation. So there's still have to be a process, a workflow where someone does 100% review of all of the translations that are coming from GPT. And as of today, GPT is a bit slow as compared to traditional MT. So if you want to run this against larger amounts of text, you can expect some delays. At Smartcat, we provide access to two versions of GPT, which is GPT 3.5 and GPT-4. And GPT-4 can be like 10 to 20 times slower depending on the language pair as compared to the traditional MT. So let's talk about what we have right now in Smartcat in terms of access to generative AI, to OpenAI GPT. You can run this in two modes. The first mode is translation engine. So you can configure that so that becomes one of the available translation engines that you can run against any document that you translate. And Juan will be doing the demo of all of that you see on the screen today. The other one is what we call AI actions. These are sort of short recipes that say, okay, take this text and process it with GPT and return the result and make that result a translation, like a value of any segment. So you can run them interactively within the editor. And this allows not only for translation, but for all different types of text transformation. So I won't hijack any more time from you today because we have Juan who will be presenting just that. So I'll stop sharing the screen. Juan will start sharing his, and I will be returning after the demo. Juan, please continue.
Great. Hi all. Let me share my screen as well. Yeah. Oops. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we do.
Right. So one of the things to take into account in GPT is slightly slower than other engines, so I'm not going to run a whole project now. I'm just going to explain how it's run, but I'll explain how it works in Smartcat. So when you create a project, or in this case, I'm just going to show you when you create a template, you can choose your engines, right? So in this case, I have chosen GPT-4, but I could choose one of the other engines that we have available, okay? So that's one option, just run it against the whole document and all the segments. And that's what I've done for this project. So it's just a simple web page, Smartcat web page, and I just run it with ChatGPT, and I'll show you what the prompt was. But in practice, what I've just done is just tell ChatGPT, you're a translator, translate this. Don't do anything else. You can see that English to French is probably a good result. It's still, there's a lot of literature about whether it's good or better or worse than others. But again, the power comes in the customization. So one of the things that we have done here, for instance, is like, as Igor was explaining, is implement these actions. You can see a few of them are standard, and we offer them by default to everyone. And then there's others that I have created myself. And again, I'll show you how that works. So I'm going to use, for instance, the punctuation. So if I just break the punctuation of the whole thing, just remove it everywhere and just say, just fix it for me. Again, it's slightly slower than others, so just bear with it for 2 or 3 seconds. But hey, my punctuation is back, right? So it has even fixed it a bit more, okay? Other things I can do is like, I don't know, maybe this one, is too long. And I say like, please, can you shorten it? Because again, it doesn't fit quite well within the width of my screen. Again, bear with it a few seconds. And it has shortened it, right? So this is, again, AI tools is a great tool for me. It's a great tool for translators at this point. So it's like helping you do things that are outside translation. In some cases, just fix things. In other cases, it's just rephrasing it, making it more fluent, making it more for a neutral voice, or shorten it, or anything else that you may want to do, or more accurate or more fluent. And I am going to show you how it's done in terms of prompts. So when you have Smartcat, you can access these presets, right? So, and one of them is called GPT-4, and it's the one that is going to translate. As I was explaining, it's just the saying like you are a translator and your entire response must be a translation. Now, the power here is that as a client, as a user of Smartcat, you can come here and add anything you want, right? So you can add the tone of voice, you can add the personas, you can add SEO keywords, you can add how fluent or accurate you want the content to be. Essentially, everything that used to be pretty much a style guide and terminologies and every other feed that comes to translators, they can just be here, right? So as everything at this point is just an experimental kind of playing with prompts until you find the right thing. But the power is there to actually use it. And I leave Igor later to explain what is coming next in terms of giving context to ChatGPT. But still, context is king as always, and in this case, it's not different. This is the translation, and I can show you, for instance, what happens if I just ask to rephrase. So it's like, hey, given the source and the target, just rephrase it, right, in a different manner, just to give me another version because I didn't like the other one. Just to give you a quick view here, you can play with the content up there. So I can just, as a playground, I can just run translations here until I get the right prompt. So I don't need to go reanalyze it. Some other examples, I don't know, the neutral one, it will like things that are interesting, right? So depending on the language, target language, is very important these days to be able to be neutral and not discriminate against any particular population. Like all the previous things I have explained, the important thing here is that these are your own actions. So you can actually build your own actions and do things that are relevant to each of your use cases. We have clients that used this fix punctuation in the source, because that's when it's a problem, right? They can even fix the grammar in the source, like with the grammar, because many of the source content, much of the source content doesn't come properly formatted or properly with a proper grammar, because maybe it's, software localization and the developers are not even so fluent in English. So it's finding the right things to do for you and also giving it enough context of the client, of the translation, and the target audience. And that's pretty much it. It's quite simple, but it's quite powerful already. And I'll leave Igor to explain what's coming next.
Thank you so much, Juan. Let me start sharing my screen. So Juan gave a great brief introduction of what we have in terms of AI actions and in terms of configurability. What comes next is even more configurability. So we are working on providing additional context that can be used in templates. For example, right now you can use source text, target text, source language, and target language as so-called placeholders and prompts, and construct your prompts around those so that GPT has this context. So what we are working on is an ability to add comments, glossary terms, and different pre-existing fuzzy TM matches into the mix, and construct prompts in a way that will use previous translations in order to provide more consistent output. One thing that GPT is known for is an ability to use so-called different shots to steer how it works. So, for example, you can say, I have this text, this similar text, and it was translated like that. And now I have a slightly different text. Please translate it according to the example that I provided. So with those examples, GPT can be more predictable. And this is what we're working on in terms of enabling predictability. We're also working on personal AI actions. So what you saw there in Juan's demo was pre-built AI actions and some of the actions that were configured on the workspace level. We want you to have personal AI actions that you can configure for yourself and just run for yourself without sharing them with anyone else. Again, this will allow for more experimentation, some more creativity without exposing those maybe experimental prompts to anyone else. We're also working on a mode that we call interactive suggestions. This is when as compared to the fully interactive mode in the editor, where you decide what to run against a specific segment to improve that, we will be analyzing your content after the translation has been done based on QA checks that we already have. And by analyzing those segments, we can identify certain cases where we know we can improve the translation. For example, if you are using a traditional MT engine and it does not obey the glossary terms that you defined for the segment, so we can identify that a particular segment has some issues with glossaries, and we can run certain AI action automatically, get the result, and then guide you interactively through the process of applying those suggestions or rejecting them if you don't need them. We also are looking into using GPT to provide certain QA checks, like automatic quality scoring, all of the interesting things that are currently being used and developed with the help of GPT. They're really interesting in the context of QA. So these are just a few things that we're working on next. Of course, we're thinking about lots of more interesting applications of this emerging technology. So we're really excited about that. With this, the last slide that we are going to demonstrate here is the Q&A slide. we want to start this interactive QA session. We also provided links if you want to contact us directly. You have our emails. So with that, let's dive into QA.
Great, thanks, Igor. So I'm just going to run through these questions and you can answer them on the fly. Any questions that we don't get to, just so everybody on the phone has confidence, these are going to be logged along with the recording, so we'll answer them after the fact if we can't get to them today. But we've got lots of time, so hopefully we will answer everything. And please, if you have any other questions, drop them in the Q&A section now. And I also see there are some dropping into chat, so it would be great if you could put them in the Q&A, even if you've already dropped a question in chat. Okay, number one, is AI translation available for free plan members?
I can take that. So yes, right now we opened OpenAI GPT to the general public. We consider this an open beta. We're still looking into how users are working with this new functionality. And right now it's available for all free plan members for as long as you have a corporate account. We currently do not show that to freelancers, but our plan is to ensure that the actions that are set up by the clients who you're working with as a freelancer will also be available to you in the editor. So stay tuned for that.
Great. Next question. Can you modify standard parameters for ChatGPT translation inside the prompt, temperature, penalties, etc.?
Right now, we don't offer that, but these are our next steps in terms of configurability of AI actions and translation engines. For AI actions, it makes more sense to tweak those, especially the temperature, so that it can be even more creative.
Great. And then there's a related one. Have you considered an open prompt solution instead of creating multiple templates?
I'm not sure if I fully get this question, so maybe Nick, you can provide some elaboration on that, and we can return to this later. What is the open prompt solution?
Okay, next up from Bruna. Juan mentioned something about we being able to put the SEO keywords in the GPT-4 prompt. I'm curious, how would this work in practice? Would GPT-4 use the keywords in its translation? Would it be optimized? Would it optimize the text translated, presumably for SEO?
I can take that one. So the answer of whether it will be able to optimize or to translate is both. So if you use it in the translation prompt, it will translate with the keywords. If you use it in the optimize, what is already translated by a human or another machine translation engine, then it will do it. Now, it requires quite a lot of playing with the prompts, and your own keywords, and you actually, lessons learned, you have to tell it to actually deviate from the source, because, you are telling it in the prompt via translator, and then you are telling it, like many, maybe some of you in the call actually know, you are telling it that now introduce the keywords that were not there in the source. And then it will kind of struggle, right? But if you actually tell it, just deviate from the source as much as you can and try to do it, as much as is sensible, introduce the keywords, it will. So it's maybe you playing kind of with the prompt and within the playground up until you get the right level of again, deviation from the source, which is always the blocker when trying to do SEO optimization in translation, which is not quite what we are used to in terms of being faithful to the source.
Great, thank you. Next from Julia, it seems like Gen AI is great for actually post-editing a machine translation. Is it possible to set up a workflow at both MT for pre-translation, and presumably that's MT with any engine, not just GPT, and then GPT-4 for optimization?
Yeah, I can take this one. Hi, Julia. So yes, that's something that we're currently working on. I mentioned AI suggestions. This is exactly what you're describing, basically. So you can use any MT engine as a first step, and then we'll be analyzing the segments and presenting you some suggestions on how to improve them. So this requires a bit of a new UI, some new approaches, but this is something that we're actually exploring.
Cool. We have two, somebody's happy about that. That's good. We have two questions from Anya. The first one, is Smartcat more MT and GPT AI more modern? That's the first question.
GPT AI is more modern. We can answer this one and then come on to the second one, Coleman. So GPT is more modern, but at the same time, Smartcat is an aggregator at some level. So we can pick and choose what you want for the different language combinations and the different source text at this point. So I don't know if Igor, you want to complement that answer.
Yeah, that answer is great, and I'm looking at the other, like the next follow-up answer from Ayana, which is, do both save terms into translation memory? So I can handle that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, whatever you're working on in the editor, be it traditional MT or OpenAI, like AI actions based on OpenAI GPT, all of the edits, all of the revisions of your text are being saved into translation memory. So in the end, you have, a variety of tools to use when you're doing the translation, and ultimately the final result always goes into translation memory and then reused in your future projects.
Great, thank you. And the next question from Vidula is very similar to that first question from Anya, where Vidula said, I tried to translate with GPT from English into Hindi, Marathi, and other Indian languages. It was 1, slow, and 2, not much different from MT. And just thinking of what you presented earlier, Igor, where you laid out, traditional MT engines tend to be faster than GPT-4, right?
Yeah, so they're definitely faster. And this is the limitation of technology, but we see how quickly it evolves, and we can expect that to be changing quite soon. So do not be detracted with the current state of things. Just think, a few steps ahead, play around. Our goal is for you to be able to use the technology at its current state and see where it's applicable, where it saves you time. And speed will absolutely come up later. Now, GPT-4 is like quality in terms of translation can really depend on source and target languages. So you might not see the same, effect or like high boost of quality as compared to traditional MT engines, for example, in Hindi. But what makes sense for you to experiment with is to tweak those prompts and see how they affect the output. Because in certain cases, you can say to create a profile that says, act as an expert in this particular field, now translate this into other languages. So with that, you can have a much better output for very specific use cases, using different genders, or providing gender neutral translation, or translating for a specific subject, or using certain keywords, or even instructing GPT to use certain formatting. And those smaller things that GPT adds, which traditional MT cannot add, they will contribute to your productivity. When it comes to working with multiple segments and doing some repetitive edits, you may find that even if GPT is currently slower, it still gives you a boost in productivity because you don't have to do a lot of repetitive post editing.
Right. Big question about data protection. In this specific format of the question, it says, is data protection on the Smartcat side or with the traditional / generative MT provider?
So we're working with providers, with MT providers, with OpenAI as a provider of GPT technology. On both sides, there are certain regulatory things that are going on. We are protecting our side of the workflows, the data that we store in your account, in your workspaces inside Smartcat. They are also providing some certain way of protecting your data when it's going into their servers. So with MT, for example, your data is not stored on MT engines, and you can look how different MT providers offer some like privacy policy documents, etc. So we're just sending over your content. It's being translated on the fly. You return back. Nothing stays on the servers of MT engines. This is how they usually operate. Of course, when you're doing the translations and you're saving them inside Smartcat, so they are stored in Smartcat just by the nature of the tool. But we are taking a lot of precaution on how to protect users' privacy and users' data. The same goes with OpenAI GPT. So when we are using GPT as a provider through the API, they are not using that to train their engines. This is, again, written pretty clear in their policies. So again, we're just sending the content, they return the output, they do not store that anywhere, and the content is stored inside Smartcat in the form of final translations.
An Igor question for me, just to build on that. Is that the case, irrespective of whether they're using 3.5 or 4.0, whether they use our key or their key, or it's just a universal policy and standard?
Yeah, exactly. So when you're using ChatGPT as the officially provided tool by OpenAI, just go into their interface and do some interactive chat session. These sessions are stored, and they're using them for training of their engine going forward. But when they provide an API access to providers such as Smartcat, they're not using this for training, and it is regardless of the settings. You can use any like GPT 3.5, GPT-4. It's all the same. We're using the same APIs, so yeah, data is not used for training at OpenAI.
Okay. I see a question further down from Sandra, which asks specifically about European compliance. I think we've covered it, but is there anything else there?
Yeah, we're just following like what the industry currently has. I know that there are certain regulatory, kind of like activities going on between EU and OpenAI. We'll see how that evolves. I think OpenAI already tries, to comply with all of the regulations there.
Okay, very broad question. What languages does ChatGPT support in translation? Can I translate into Hebrew, to or from Hebrew? And is it good enough?
Yeah, first of all, GPT and like OpenAI as the owner of this technology, they do not say which languages GPT supports. They kind of scan the entire internet. So whatever was there, they are supporting to some extent. For certain languages, the support is much better just because there was more context to train this on. And for certain languages, it's less. So again, your mileage may vary depending on the languages that you're using. But I believe Hebrew should be supported, and you can always try GPT on Hebrew and see how that compares to traditional MT engines.
Yeah, and speaking of traditional engines, the support for Hebrew is deep and broad in the traditional engines like DeepL or Google. So somebody has an option there, right?
Yeah, of course. How I think tries to understand what the quality is, and I think it just makes sense for you to try this into in Smartcat, compare the results, try to translate something with GPT with the default profile and with the traditional MT engine, and basically see for yourself based on your specific content.
Great. Anya responded back on the question of translation, traditional MT. Her specific question is, sorry, I meant, is Smartcat more traditional MT and GPT AI more modern?
Yeah, I think the answer will still be the same, Ayana. So Smartcat is not about this or that. Smartcat is a tool that allows you to incorporate all of the modern technologies, traditional MT and GPT into your workflows. So you can decide. You can say that GPT more modern. It's definitely something that gets much more attention these days. It's a different technology. It's not a translation engine per se, but it can be used as a translation engine to a great extent. So it's hard to compare different things. It's just like two tools that some of them are better than the others at certain tasks. And our goal is to give you those tools to our clients so that they can create efficient workflows.
Right. And the advantage of Smartcat is you do get to choose. You get to use a combination of traditional MT, if that's the best one for your particular application, but you still get that additional user experience of being able to modify it using GPT.
Yes.
Correct. Nick was clarifying on his earlier question about whether or not we were going to make it easier to basically construct prompts. So I think there's two pieces to his clarifying question here. Where you request actions that you need without going through the back end and configuring them as buttons. So having it more like a chat, like you would see within ChatGPT, versus creating an action and then clicking a button to activate it. What's our plans for kind of having a more hybrid model or shifting more towards a chat model within Smartcat?
Okay. Yeah, for chat-like UI to do certain actions in Smartcat is something that we are considering right now. Stay tuned for the news. As for AI actions, to have, just as I understand, a generic AI action or just prompt that you can run against your input, what we believe is better is actually those templates, and I'll tell you why. You can always, what we're building, by the way, is an ability to, when you are in the editor, right from the editor, being able to tweak your prompts and test them. So in a sense, you will have this ability to play around with different prompts right from within editor, instead of going into some other place, configuring your actions and then going back to the editor. That's for sure. But many of those actions are meant to be certain specific things that you will do repetitively over and over again. And even if you are doing something like rephrase this text, and do this prompt ad hoc multiple times, this can quickly become boring. So instead of doing that, we want you to play around in this playground environment, see what works best on your input, save that as a template, and then apply that with a single shortcut to multiple segments. But you will have a more interactive experience in the editor soon.
Great. Does the use of these buttons or pre-configured prompts also help increase workflow efficiency, so you can add those into a workflow with greater consistency?
Yeah, of course. So we're providing 5, like right now it's 5 predefined actions. Something that Juan didn't show in his demo, but we added recently, is an ability to configure your panel. So you can rearrange those buttons, you can hide certain buttons, you can completely hide the pre-built ones and use your own. And with that, you can configure your workflow for a specific task that you are working on. So for example, you can have, I don't know, 10 different like highly tuned AI actions for certain things, for certain types of content that you're translating. You are currently working on a specific content. You just need 3 actions. You can quickly configure your panel to leave just the important ones in the order that you need, and they will be assigned specific keyboard shortcuts, so you can quickly apply them as you're working through the editor. And when you are switching to another tool or another project with different subject or whatever, you can use different actions as well.
Great. Another broad question from Mikhail. What is the main application for GPT, and I'm going to interpret here a bit. I think what you actually mean is GPT as implemented within Smartcat. Is it for translation or improving source and then improving target?
So this, I can take this one because I did mention like we have a few customers who are starting to use it for improving the source, but I don't think we have a good answer in terms with we don't have good data in terms of what is used more, right? So we will see over the next few months. We are giving the tools to the community, to our clients and translators, and we'll see, how things are used and get back with data. I think both things are kind of useful, not only improving the source, but improving the target in terms of reaching it and changing the tone of voice and fixing the grammar and everything else that we have been showing, or keywords. Yeah, at this point, I think it's open to a question to our users, how you want to use it.
Yeah, I think the great thing about GPT is that it's versatile. It's all-purpose tool that you can play around and infinitely tweak to your liking. So that's the main beauty of that.
Okay, and we have what looks more like a comment. Keyword optimization is a very interesting topic. Are you planning to implement a standard prompt for that?
We can definitely provide some guidance to help our clients start with something. I think with keyword optimization, every client has their own keywords. So yeah, we can probably work with you, Julia, directly to come up with something that will work in your specific case. But I think it's exactly the case where every client will have something different.
Great. And related to that, from Katia, do you have some sort of prompt guide that we can use inside of Smartcat?
I don't think we do, but we probably should. So stay tuned. So
yeah, we show a link to a document that shows some of the suggestions. Those suggestions will be definitely expanded over time. Yeah.
Okay. So coming, stay tuned. All right. I've got a very legitimate question here from Aristia. Sounds like you're a freelancer. Hi, what will happen to us translators if the ChatGPT engine replaces the manual translator? Do the translators become jobless, or I can work together with the ChatGPT?
I think it's the same question that we were been answering for the last 10 years, right? Or 15. So, I don't think this is different. So it's just another tool. Things will just improve. And, we have more and more data anyway to translate. And I don't think it will get to a point where, it does the whole translation, but it's an open question.
Okay. Another question from, I think it's Root. Can ChatGPT AI replace existing machine translation engines, or is it used additionally to them? And then a question about language support. Does it support right to left languages like Arabic and Hebrew? I think this is similar to what we answered already.
Yeah, it's best to experiment with different languages and see what it outputs. Replacing, again, the technology evolves very rapidly these days, so we cannot predict what will come next. I think in certain cases, in certain language pairs, we already see that GPT produces better results overall in terms of translation. But again, the main kind of caveat here is that you still want to be reviewing what it does, what it produces. So in that sense, if you are like 100% doing human review for all of the machine translation, you may be like as of today replacing your MT engine, like traditional MT engine, with GPT, doing the same kind of blanket review of all of the content and get the benefits of that. But if you were using MT like for unsupervised translation, or just selective post editing, I think you cannot, in the current state of things, you cannot replace that with GPT just yet.
Great. Let's see, we're running kind of low on time. There's still some questions. Just trying to find, there's several questions on pricing. I think we could maybe bolt those together. So how does the pricing model look? Is the price for GPT-4 included in the monthly payments?
I can take those ones. Yeah. Generally, the pricing structure of Smartcat, you sign for one of the tiers, and then you get a number of smart words. Smart words is the words you translate using our technology, whether that's AI, translation, memory, etc. So the fact that you are using ChatGPT doesn't change your consumption. So if you were using Google Translate or DeepL before, it's going to be exactly the same. That's when you use it for translation of the whole document. As of today, using the actions to improve is not charged on top, so that it doesn't consume smart words. And the playground where you play with your prompts is not consuming smart words either.
Great. There's another question that feels like it's in that same realm of, do we provide any documentation or a list of terminology? For SEO optimization specifically, is there any place where we can where can we find standardized variables, or where can we create them as we develop our own prompt templates?
So when you're using the UI of Smartcat to create or tweak those presets, those AI actions, we provide you some help on the sidebar, showing you what templates can you use, what placeholders in those templates you can use to inject your source text and target text. So in there, we also provide this link to the document where we explain more, like provide documentation for that, and give you some ideas of how to use prompts inside Smartcat. Speaking of SEO optimization, it seems to be a hot topic. So Coleman, we should be definitely considering doing a different, like a dedicated session or a blog post about that, just to give people the idea of how they can use that. But very briefly, what you can do in your prompts is say, okay, I want to translate from this language into that language. You can use one of our starter prompts as a starter for a generic translation kind of engine. But you can also tweak that and say, okay, I want it to be SEO friendly. I want to use those terms as much as possible, and just provide a list of few terms that you care about. And with that, you will be tweaking the output so that it uses those terms more often. So that's just a broad idea, again, and just off the top of my head, how I would be constructing a prompt in GPT for that.
Great. So we will provide a list of the variables that we support out of the box, and then obviously people can develop their own prompts.
The documentation is already there when you are creating your AI actions or MT preset for GPT-based translation engines.
Great. I see a few questions. How do I access GPT? How do I turn it on my platform? So maybe just give some very specific directions there, so anybody has the answer.
So if you are a corporate Smartcat user, you already have GPT available as one of the MT engines. So you can, as one demonstrated, you can use them inside templates. And whenever you're creating a new project with this template, it will have GPT engine pre-selected, or you can go into project settings and then select a particular engine for a particular language pair. You can even have multiple presets or profiles and use them for different languages. So again, this is like very configurable. AI actions also is something that is available for you. If you go into the editor, into any project, you will see the AI actions button, which you can press and see the toolbar with at least those 5 predefined actions that we provide.
Okay, but if you're not a paying customer, or if you want to set up a sandbox environment, how do you get access to it there? Do you have to submit the form for beta access?
No, it's openly available. If you are not a paid customer, you still have an ability to work with this technology as of today. But again, not paid and freelancer are two different audiences. So if you register as a freelancer, for now, for the time being, you don't have access to that. So we're working on implementing GPT for individual users as well. But if you create an account at Smartcat, as of today, out of the box, you will see an option to use GPT as a translation engine, and you will see those pre-built AI actions in the editor.
Okay, so maybe the right thing to do is for freelancers, we'll set up a similar pre-registration page where people can say, hey, I'm interested in getting access to this, and we at least capture that input. And then we can share the link in email after this call.
Yeah, great idea.
Okay. All right, so we've got one here from Alicia. This is really more about a broad product feature. I'm currently a user of DeepL, and one of the things I love the most is the fact that I have a drop-down that gives you different translations for a word. I don't see this in Smartcat yet. Is this something you're working on?
Yes, these are one of those like improvements that we're planning to do. So in addition to being able just to do, for example, like rephrase the whole sentence, you would be able to select a specific keyword and get the output of different, synonyms and all of that. So we're working on implementing more interactive features that work on particular selection or a particular word instead of the entire segment.
Will that work irrespective? Does that depend on GPT, or is that something that will be just a standard part of the interface, even if you're not using GPT?
Well, it will be using GPT for sure under the hood, at least as a first implementation. But it's more of a generic feature that we are thinking about.
Okay. I think it's the final question from Gabriella. We have a very big TB. Is there any way we can feed the client's terminology to GPT? Token limits are not helping.
Yeah, right now you cannot feed like your entire terminology base into GPT, but what we're looking for is when you are translating, or like we'll be suggesting you like better translations for a certain segment. We'll be looking at which terms are there in the source, how they were translated in the target. And if there is a mismatch between your terminology base and the actual translation, this triggers a QA check that says certain term has been translated incorrectly. And based on that, we can feed that into like GPT and provide a translation that is revised, that uses a more appropriate translation for the term.
The power here is that finally, after so many years of terminology and MT not being able to handle declensions and genders and plurals and word compositions, ChatGPT is now able to do all that much better, right? So
great. Okay, we are just about out of time. We've got two questions that are more like a direct response, one from Gabriella, one from Giovanni. We will respond to you directly. Yes, the webinar has been recorded, and we will be sharing a link to the recording within the next 2 days. We will also have a transcription of the Q&A session. And if you do want to, if you want to try it out, you can go directly to the platform. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us directly. And thank you again so much for participation. Thanks, Juan and Igor, for leading it.
No problem.
And
thank you.
With that, we will say goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.